So January 7th, 2026, and yet another day of abject humiliation for the Kremlin, as if the ongoing events in Iran and the toppling of the Maduro dictatorship down in Venezuela weren't enough to send the old Moscow gargoyle over the edge. We've got a joint military operation between the United States, Great Britain, and NATO, taking out two members of Russia's shadow tanker fleet over the course of about an hour's time. The first one was up between, it's in the North Sea, between Ireland and Iceland, and the one that you're watching here, this is down in the Caribbean, and apparently, according to U.S. authorities, was loaded with about 1.8 million barrels of Venezuelan crude, which is roughly equivalent to about a day and a half of that nation's entire oil production. Just historic stuff. Apparently, it's going to become, according to the U.S. authorities, it's apparently going to become property of the United States, whatever that means. More humiliation for the Kremlin at this hour, as a true special military operation is ongoing, with NATO forces seizing a sanctioned Russian tanker on the North Sea. Operations included just a laundry list of apparently some of NATO's most advanced aircraft. Russia sent a submarine and other ships as a show of force that ultimately did nothing in response. And that is the real story, you guys. Russian propagandists are in an uproar. And here's just a schematic of what the air constituent of that whole operation entailed. The days in which Russia can just emit a propaganda deluge, we're going to nuke everybody, okay, give us Ukraine, okay, thanks. Those days, it seems, are finally over. And the weaker that Russia looks, especially with the ongoing dismantling of their entire, Iran, these are all of Russia's closest economic, political, military allies on a daily basis, just being ripped to shreds. I'll get into all the things happening in Iran in a minute. I think it's only this trajectory is probably set. And how is the Russian propaganda apparatus handling this? Well, they're not handling it well, you guys. Russian military bloggers are now suggesting Donald Trump be assassinated because of the U.S. seized oil tanker. And this is just one of probably over a dozen of the biggest military bloggers are all saying the same exact thing today. A year ago, this would have caused bewilderment and laughter. Now this deranged orange pedophile, with his bombing of civilians in Nigeria, where no actual ISIS targets were hit, his invasion of Venezuela and the murder of its citizens on land and at sea, his threats to seize Greenland and overthrow the president of Colombia, and his open declaration of aggression across an entire hemisphere should be alarming and prompting the entire world to take action. If this continues, the question should be asked whether he should be allowed to physically survive to the end of his terms. These are fighting words. I don't know, this is, that's not the only, it's seriously about over a dozen of the biggest bloggers are all saying the same thing. A dark day for Russia's military bloggers as the realization dawns that propaganda alone is no longer scaring the West into submission, with two Russian shadow tankers seized in one day. It turns out that empty diplomatic statements no longer frighten them. And just more statements of varying degrees saying pretty much that we are now at war with the U.S. from the Russian perspective. Another one, Russian bloggers are calling for military action against the U.S. in response to seized oil tankers. The United States captured another, this is a statement from the Russians, this is 1.23 million subscribers on this one, it's a pretty big channel. The United States captured another Russian tanker, Sophia, in the waters of the Caribbean Sea. It was heading from Venezuela with a cargo of oil, the Southern Command of the American Army. Economic blockade, comrades, and it is possible to act in response only by military means. They really think they are bogged down outside Pokrovsk. I'm going to get into that in a second. And they can't take Pokrovsk, and now they think they're going to go up against the United States and NATO. This is just getting absolutely delusional. It always was delusional, but now it's becoming, it's descending into hilarity. Sounds like there were Russians. This is the official response. I'll just read you the headline. Russia calls for humane and proper treatment of citizens on the Marinara. That's the name of the ship seized between Ireland and Iceland. And this was about a 2-week hot pursuit, in which the crew even painted a Russian flag, I guess assuming Trump's soft spot for the Russians. They painted a Russian flag while they were being pursued across the Atlantic. And 9 other ships also did the same thing. Members of Russia's shadow tanker fleet also did the same thing, thinking that it then created some sort of immunity. But we see how that went down. Russia's foreign ministry has demanded that the U.S. ensure humane and proper treatment of Russian citizens aboard the Marinara, calling for their rights and interests to be observed. Because we know how much Russia cares about their, in quotes, Russian citizens, right? As we see 1.2 million have now been lost in Ukraine. It adds that the U.S. must not hamper their soonest return to Russia. So you have to really start questioning what is really on this ship. We're probably going to find out in the next few days. But the fact that, it's an empty tanker, and these things aren't worth that much money, and they wouldn't stop. And now Russia is so concerned about the guys that happened to be on it. I mean, as you know, there was you probably know there was a Russian cargo ship that went down exactly a year ago off the coast of Spain, and it wasn't until last week that we found out that Russia was ferrying 2 North Korean nuclear reactors that are now sitting on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So we'll see how this goes. But I mean, it seems like Russia is really interested in protecting the people or whatever this thing was ferrying, attempted to ferry across the Atlantic. And that's not all. The hits keep coming for Russia. Russia's export income continues to collapse, now down 35% since October, falling to just $959 million for the week, the lowest level since the war began. This is according to Bloomberg calculations. Weekly oil revenues are now roughly $500 million lower than in early October and nearly $200 million lower than at the start of December. Urals crude remains in steep decline, trading at a close to 50% discount to Brent. Nobody wants this stuff. It's floating all over the world's oceans right now, just sitting in tankers. Urals crude oil remains in steep decline, trading at close to a 50% discount to Brent since U.S. sanctions targeted Rosneft and Lukoil. Prices for Russia's main export grade have fallen by almost 40%. In early January, Urals sold for around $36.69 per barrel at Baltic ports and $34 at Baltic Sea terminals. ESPO crude shipped east and primarily purchased by China averaged about $47.55 per barrel. The erosion of Russia's primary war revenue source is no longer gradual. It is steady, compounding, and increasingly visible. And just take a look at the chart there. Just a cataclysmic drop in this trajectory. I don't know. I mean, something about 45% of all of Russia's entire tax revenue comes from the taxation of oil and gas. So this is not boding well for the future of Russia. And just to show you that this is not just this isn't some new trend. You know, the past 10 years have been a disaster for Russia's oil production. And with all infrastructure cash now going to war, it's about to get much worse. In comparison, the U.S. So this is U.S. crude oil production. So you can see it's about 8.5 million barrels a day back about 10 years ago. And then look at Russia. Russia was about, close to 11 million a year ago. And now they're down, if you believe the official numbers, they're around 9.7 million barrels. And this stuff is only getting more and more expensive to extract because they're not drilling new wells. They're just exploiting old wells with increasingly decaying infrastructure. So the price per barrel is only going up as far in terms of the extraction. And skipping over to yet another authoritarian kleptocracy, before 1999, Venezuela was a U.S. ally aligned with Europe and the democratic world. After embracing Russia and its anti-democracy league, the same old decay and corruption we saw behind Europe's Iron Curtain ate the country from within. This is Venezuelan crude oil production. And right here you can see when Chavez came in. This is right when they aligned with the Russian world. And exactly what we see, the old decay and kleptocracy set in as you no longer invest in oil infrastructure, highways, economy, fair judicial practices. You end up with nothing but a cataclysmic drop into oblivion. In the Russian world or in any of Russian allied states, it's always the same. If there's money sitting in a place, that money is stolen. It's not, so they allocate some money for roads. I knew a story back in eastern Ukraine, back during the Yanukovych days, where the local mayor owned a tile factory. Well, he stole a tile factory. And so when it came time to pave the streets in the city, they actually paved it with tile from his factory rather than with the normal asphalt process, because, I mean, he made, whatever, $100 million allocated from the federal budget. And you ask, why would the federal budget waste $100 million on that? Well, because he split it up with the guys at the federal budget. And that's how this stuff works. And you see, that's when you align with the Russian world, this is your reality. Another clear case of the hell unleashed on a nation's citizenry when a government aligns with Russia. Around the time Poland escaped the decades of decay that Moscow's grip entailed, Venezuela embraced the Russian world. Poland now has a $1 trillion economy, and Venezuela is back to the 1930s. And let me just pull this out here just to demonstrate. So this was Poland escaping the Russian world. This is Poland escaping the Russian world, you guys. And here is Venezuela. So they both start at the same point. GDP per capita, 1931 to 1922. Traveling along, and roughly about the same time, so about 1990, and then you've got the year 2000. You remember we had a worldwide oil spike around this time. So they made more money, but the amount of barrels that they're extracting from the ground only continued to decline. And then when one thing caught up with the other, you had a cataclysmic collapse in the economy. And now you have Venezuela as it is today. And Poland is now a $1 trillion economy. And this is always how it goes. I'm just trying to really hammer it home, in terms of why Ukraine does not want to be part of the Russian world. And when you have a culture that just basks in this kleptocracy, generation after generation, you basically get Russia. I mean, you go on Russian Telegram and you see these women, they're just marrying soldier after soldier, hunting for anyone that's about to be shipped off to the front in order to collect the death benefits. I mean, at every level of Russian society, you see this. Dishonesty, theft, these things are attributes in Russian culture. Excited at the prospect that her father has probably been killed while invading Ukraine, a Russian woman plans out all the nice things that she'll purchase after she gets the death benefit. One of many films like this says that her father died. They think he's dead. And her friend's like, wait, he's dead? But this girl just wants him to be dead. Recently, in June or July, well, he has a friend. My mom talked to him. There they said that he had a serious injury to his leg, and they left him there. He is clearly either dead or missing. I don't know yet, and she doesn't care. That is a chance, so there is a chance, but it is very small, like a 2% chance that he is in captivity, because the body has not yet been found. But my mom said that it's unlikely. So what would you buy for $7 million? That's the amount of the death benefit. She wants to buy a house, she says. A private house. For how much? And then she goes into what kind of house. It's just thoroughly disgusting, you guys. And Russia's depopulation crisis continues to spiral, with entire regions now devoid of life. And this is just in parallel to while Russia's spending, I guess apparently about 30 million euros per week convincing Western audiences that their cultures are dying, decaying west, and blah, blah, blah. That is really happening in Russia. They have a massive immigration influx from all Middle Eastern countries, and as well as the Stans, the Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and the like. And that's the only reason that their population isn't in full collapse mode, like 10% a year type of levels. Russia's depopulation crisis deepens as government writes off whole towns. So they're removing whole towns now from the public registers because they just no longer exist. And this is a picture that just sums up Russia, really, doesn't it? Over the past 2 years, the abandonment of towns across Russia's regions has accelerated dramatically. According to official data, 266 populated villages and towns were completely removed from existence across Russia over the past year alone. The year before that, another 306 villages and hamlets ceased to exist. In total, more than 500 populated places have disappeared in just 2 years, wiped off the administrative maps because no one lives there anymore. There is not a marginal phenomenon. This is not a marginal phenomenon affecting remote tundra outposts or isolated Arctic settlements. The regions leading this collapse are what Moscow itself calls historical Russian regions, the very heartland the state claims to defend, preserve, and glorify. And this is just a list of all of the regions that and how many towns that they have lost. And demonstrations continue to grow across Iran now into the 11th day, with several cities reportedly now under the control of protesters demanding the ouster of the mullah regime. And they are not merely seeking the ouster of the mullah regime, they then wish for the installation of a pro-Western secular Shah who now lives in the United States. There is no way to paint the Iranian situation in any light that has potential to benefit the Kremlin in any way. And Iran is a massive country, a key political, economic, and military ally of the savage Russian hell state. And we have another clip of protests. Protests now overwhelming riot police in several Iranian cities. And there's several clips now today of the riot police being overwhelmed by the protesters. Here they are chasing the riot police down the street with stones. And there's supposedly about 20,000 people that have already been arrested. Around 100 dead. And these Iranians are fighting for their freedom, guys, and we should support them in any way that we can. Things in Iran are getting more interesting by the hour. Not a good week for Putin. And there's just a cool photo that I found. This is from one of the protests today. This woman lighting her cigarette with a portrait that looks like the Ayatollah, not the current mullah. Very cool. The world is becoming a very interesting place, you guys. In attempts to deflect from the imploding economy, the catastrophic war, and to prevent the Czar from facing a pitchforky end, the Kremlin has begun a propaganda campaign pushing to bestow the title The Great on the aging Russian dictator. And this is a propaganda campaign that they are now unleashing on the domestic population. There is no actual push for it. What they do is on everything from cooking shows, politics, or even the economics channels, they're just dropping this in to make it look like it's some sort of organic push for the public to then further praise their gargoyle midget czar with a title, Putin the Great, like Catherine the Great or Peter the Great. So they asked this woman if, and she definitely doesn't want to be thrown out a window anytime soon. So she just talks about how amazing the Russian economy is, and it's all because of Putin. We are experiencing all of them today. She's talking about the benefits of everything, how awesome Russian is. And it's all because of Putin. He took responsibility and determined the future vector of the country's development, which meets public demand. The people demanded it, and Putin delivered. So I would definitely say yes, the Great. So this is probably going to happen. There'll probably be some special convening of the Russian Duma to bestow this title on the gargoyle midget czar, which is, just insanity upon insanity. And just a reminder as to the absolutely ridiculous scale of the Russian propaganda machine that's mainly aimed at sowing division within Western societies. The UK remains one of Russia's primary targets of disinformation. Member of Parliament Stephen Doughty explains that just the public part of Russia's propaganda efforts is now spending 30 million euros per week. And that's the public part. That's on the books, and they admit.
New technologies obviously made it easier to spread harmful activity widely. And what we now face is coordinated, well-funded information operations by hostile states that are determined to weaken and divide our democracies and societies. And it's part of a growing wave of wider hybrid threats we're seeing across Europe and beyond, including targeting the UK. And I want to be really clear, Chair, this is information warfare. And the playbook spans fake news sites, deepfake videos, armies of bots flooding social media with lies. You'll have seen and heard of many of the different examples. And just to give the committee an idea of the scale of the threat that we face, particularly from Russia, this year, Russia alone plans to spend 30 million euros weekly on state propaganda. Its own budget proposals admit this. It's a total of 1.5 billion euros. Outlets like Rybar already push content in 28 languages, reaching millions. And of course, we know from very, very high profile examples, such as during the Skripal poisonings, that we were flooded with different conflicting, disturbing and fake narratives about the origins of that attack, which of course we know were of course Russia. And we of course see overt state propaganda, but we also see covert operations outsourced to others to hide Russia's intent. And of course, we see it most clearly around attempts to fracture unity and support for Ukraine. And that work is happening.
And like I said, that 30 million is that is the public part. So whatever it is, we definitely know it is probably multiples higher than that at this point. While simultaneously continuing to destroy thousands of churches all over Ukraine, murdering and torturing priests and pastors, Russian propaganda rolls out one of the Putins. Ukrainian intelligence says there's at least 4 Putins, guys, so I'm not just making this stuff up, and it always ends up being, Ukraine is always ends up being right about these things, you guys. One of Putin's to convince Russians that he's doing God's will. The Hague is also part of that plan. And here's the gargoyle midget Czar right here himself. So you know I'm not making up this stuff. Russian soldiers are always on a mission in the name of God's will, he says, the gargoyle midget Czar. And this is the active Putin. You see, he can't stop moving. They protect the fatherland and its people. They save the motherland and its people. Throughout history in Russia, Russian soldiers have been treated as those who perform this mission at the behest of the Lord. Yeah, that's how Russian soldiers are treated. Like the ones, I mean, if you survived World War II, like Solzhenitsyn, for example, the author, he came back and he was put into prison because he survived. You know, if you survived, you were deemed, well, you must have surrendered. So I mean, you need to be in the gulag for the next 35 years. Russian soldiers are always on a mission in the name of God's will, the gargoyle midget Czar says, deceitfully. They protect the fatherland and its people. They save the motherland and its people. Throughout history in Russia, Russian soldiers have been treated as those who perform this mission at the behest of the Lord. The Lord. He, you know, if Russia had a televangelist, he would, you know, I don't know, he hits all the right points. He definitely knows his audience. And skipping over to the military front, things are not getting any better for the Russians. Dozens of Russian troops encircled in Kupiansk hospital. Russian milibloggers can't understand why they're losing on every front. And this is one of the larger Russian military blogs, and he wraps the whole thing up with Venezuela and everything. Excuse me, he says, but the idea that the Americans stole Maduro and we didn't steal Zelensky is nonsense. What's not nonsense is our detachment, either half encircled or completely encircled in the Kupiansk city hospital, holding out there for weeks like in Stalingrad. And what happens to them is more important than all the Maduros. Yeah, so look, Russians are waking up, and this is when it's going to get very interesting, because all these soldiers that are now here in Ukraine, Putin is going to need every one of them to crack skulls on the streets of St. Petersburg, Moscow, Novosibirsk. That is 100% how this is going to happen. Whether or not there's a palace coup or not, it doesn't matter. All these guys are going to have to, at some point, they're all going to have to go home. And the only job is going to be in cracking skulls. And it's going to be, 2026 is going to be very interesting, guys. This first week, just unbelievable. Iran, Venezuela, now we're seeing Russia tipping over. Things are getting very interesting. So, all right. Well, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thanks for watching. And hey, you know, I never asked anybody ever to like, but everybody, like, I know most of these big YouTubers, some in real life, we know each other, you know, one of which convinced me to start doing this whole thing. And, you know, I've never, but they're all telling me, dude, you gotta ask them to like, because they'll do it. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. I've got no problems on the likes, but the subscriptions, you know, if you guys want to subscribe, that would be great. And this is my first public appeal for that. So if you see fit, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate it. All right. Have a good one.